shoot. Fires from the top of the key and banks it home. The Liberty take a 2-point lead.
Welcome to Liberty FM, the podcast dedicated to all things New York Liberty. I'm Felicia, and I'm joined by my co-host and husband, Francois. This is episode 18, recapping Game 1 in the first round of the 2023 WNBA Playoffs. The Liberty faced off against the Washington Mystics with a strong win, beating them by a score of 90-75. Francois, let's get into this game.
Yeah, let's get started. And we knew that, it wouldn't be your usual second seed against seventh seed. We knew that Washington Mystics was probably the toughest matchup in the first round of those playoffs. And, due to a lot of injuries. And the first quarter, didn't change that fact that it was going to be a tough matchup, because the way the Mystics started that quarter, as a Liberty fan, you were kind of worried about what could happen throughout the game. How did you feel when you saw how dominant the Mystics were in that first quarter?
Yeah, I think, they played with pace. They came out strong. We know that the Mystics are a great team. The only reason they're, number 7 is, because of all the injuries they've had this season. And so, they got some of their players back, especially Elena Deladon and, Sykes. She's a phenomenal player. As annoying as she could be to other teams, you would want her on your team because she's just she's so aggressive. She gets in there. She's fighting for everything. That's just what it is. And she's just an all-around great basketball player. And you can't, forget Natasha Cloud as well. And so they came out strong. They were killing the Liberty on the pick and rolls.
Yeah, definitely.
That was their bread and butter, I think, the first quarter. And so, I think the Liberty had to really, take a time out a little bit, readjust, come back in the next quarter. But definitely the first quarter was all Washington Mystics for sure.
Yeah, I was kind of worried because every single play, the Mystics were just pick and roll, pick and roll, pick and roll. And the Liberty's defense was really struggling to communicate and, help and switch at the right times. And on offense, the Liberty are known to be an excellent ball-moving team, and I think they ended up first in assists this season. But, the Mystics with Clouds and Sykes were putting a lot of pressure on the ball, and, they turned the ball over quite a few times, I think 3 times in the first quarter, which all led to Mystics points after that. So, you were, kind of worried about the approach. But I'm glad that things started to shift in the second quarter. I know that Sabrina said after the game that, what sort of adjustment they needed to make in the second quarter. And she said that we got stopped defensively, and that was huge for them. At the beginning of the first quarter, they were giving them too many easy layups and weren't communicating well in their off-court defense. And so they started to bring more intensity. And when I say the word intensity, I cannot help but think of Betnijah Laney. Yeah. Betnijah Laney was incredible. What can we say about her?
She put the team on her back, because I definitely think, in that first quarter, everyone seemed a little shaky. It's the first playoff game, and they had some time off, and so you're just kind of wondering, how's this going to go? But Betnijah was probably, in that first half, your strongest player. She was getting down there defensively. She sets the tone defensively, and she knows that. And so she had to definitely pick up her defense, which she did. But she was also scoring. She was getting into the paint, shooting threes. She was everywhere. And so, I think that really helped the team. And that's the one thing, about the Liberty is that, I think a lot of pressure is put more on Sabrina and on Breanna Stewart. And even if they're not making their shots, the good thing is that you have other players on that team, whether it's Betnijah, whether it's JJ. And it started to really be those two initially, until everyone else started to contribute. And so, what can you say about her? She is an all-around player. You want her on your team defensively, because she definitely took it to Sykes in a great way. And I think, she set the tone for the team, and it helped the team to stay in it, to stay as close as they were, and that it wasn't some blowout.
Yeah, I mean, Sandy Brandello said after the game that we don't win this game without Betnijah Laney.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think, like, from the get-go, like, she scored, like, a free to, set the tone. And she scored a lot of points in those first 2 quarters. But also, like you said, defensively, I mean, she's pretty much guarding the best guard or one of the best players of the opposing team every single game, whether it's like, Chelsea Gray, Drew Luck, Clarendon, Sykes or Cloud, like, she's like, have to, Kalia Cooper, like, all the names that comes to mind across the season, like, and she's able to do that and also provide a big boost offensively. And I was also, we complained all season long about how sometimes the calls are very soft in the WNBA, that it doesn't take a lot for players to get calls. But I felt on the other end, this time around, this game was pretty physical. And the ref, I don't know if they forgot their whistle or something, but, they allowed a lot of freedom in this game. Even at some point, I can't remember if it was at the end of the first, I think it was at the end of the first quarter, when Deladon was interviewed by ESPN, and she was saying, like, basically, yeah, we're going to see how, this game is going to be refs, to pretty much adjust and see, are we going to be able to continue, to play that physically, or we're going to have to, like, turn it down a notch. Which showed that that was part of their plan, to be really physical with the Liberty.
Yeah, even the game before, their last home game for the regular season, the Mystics were really physical with the Liberty. And so, I was anticipating that they're going to come out in the same way, and the Liberty's just going to have to stand up to that, and it's definitely something with the refs that I was surprised they let certain calls go, and then some calls they're making, it's just, the refs are interesting. It's like, that's the best way, because it's like, for any fan, there are definitely a lot of boo birds coming down on the refs throughout the game, but I could understand that both sides were complaining, about the refs, and they had every right, because there were definitely some fouls that should have been called that didn't get called, and then fouls that were called that weren't called on the other end. So it just wasn't even. It just didn't seem like it was a balanced game. And so and missed calls at that. So I think that's the hard part, for these teams, is that when the refs I just feel like they're subpar, honestly. And so,
don't worry, you won't get fined unless
I'm not an athlete.
Unlike Sabrina, that could
I don't work for the
get
Liberty.
Fined, she says something. But
I don't work for the Liberty. We're just fans, and so the fans see it. Even when you see replays, you're like, come on, ref, you're right there. And so it's frustrating. It's frustrating, but you got to keep going, and that's the one thing that I appreciate about the Liberty, is that even if they don't get the call, they keep going. They might even complain about it, but they have to get back in the game. They can't just stay sitting there complaining to a ref. They got to get right back in and play defense and do what they got to do. And so I appreciate that about the Liberty, and that even for Sabrina, she made a couple threes instead of, complaining to the ref. She was like, you know what? I'm just move this into points, and that's what she did.
That's what she did for sure. But when you think about it, in the first half, the Liberty took their first lead of the game with 7 minutes left in the second quarter, 39-37. But at that very moment, and up until the last 2 minutes of the second quarter, Sabrina only scored her first free with 2 minutes left in the second quarter. And even more surprising, Breanna Stewart only had her first field goal with 1 minute left in that quarter. And there was an interesting stat that when we rewatched the game, later on, that showed that Breanna Stewart's in the 4 games against the Mystics in the regular seasons was shooting only 33% from the fields. And at that moment, and at the halftime, she was 1 for 7. And I was a little concerned. I mean, kudos to the Mystics defense. They put a lot of pressure on her and gave her very little space. But I felt like at times, like maybe she was forcing a little bit, and she's so athletic. She, has a long wingspan and can do so many other things that I wished at that point that she was like maybe attacking the basket a bit more. And at some point I think Sykes had 2 fouls, and Natasha Cloud at some point also had maybe 2 fouls. So I was like, maybe she should have been a little more aggressive. Now, easier said than done, but what did you make of that first half and how the Mystics defended on Stewie?
I mean, they pretty much had a suffocating defense on Stewie, and I think it's tough. They made it really hard on her to score. Some of her shots just looked like they were just short, like there were a couple of shots that she just missed, or they were just off enough, and maybe she was forcing a couple of shots or trying to, shoot a 3 instead of driving to the basket, and it's tough. But the one thing about Stewie is that she's an all-around player. It's like she's not one of those players that can only rely on a couple of things. She's an all-around player, offensively and defensively. So even though she may have seemed like in that first half, this might not be my night.
Yeah.
She picked it up in other areas defensively with blocks and rebounding, and she did all the little things to help her other teammates who were scoring to get the ball. And so, that's the thing about a great player and why, we think she deserves MVP, because even if she has an off night, she's still going to make an impact on the court, whether it be in other areas, as I said, blocks, rebounds, assists. She's going to get those numbers up to help and still be a presence or even be a distraction. Like if you're double teaming her, someone else is going to be open, and hopefully they can score. And I think that's what helped the Liberty out tonight. Every one of their starters scored and made significant contributions tonight.
Now, what did I tell you last podcast after we watched that last regular season game against the Mystic, that I want the Liberty to feed Jonquel Jones in the paint, because she could be a decisive factor, the X factor besides Betnijah Laney, and that worked pretty well in that game. Like, I think Sloot was like automatic, like getting the ball to Jonquel. I think Sabrina as well, and I don't think that the Mystics, with Shakira Austin being injured, that they really have the personnel to stop Jonquel, because Deladon is probably going to defend on Stewie, which leaves another player that has to deal with Jonquel, and there's nobody as tall and physical as her. And so I was really glad that they rely on that a lot besides Betnijah, because when you have Stewie on an off night and Sabrina that scored her first 3 late in the second quarter, that was crucial for the Liberty. What did you make of Jonquel Jones? And I felt like she was very decisive. Like, she wasn't hesitating when she was shooting on the inside, not getting afraid of the block or whatever. She was just getting in there.
Yeah, Jonquel in that game, she was so decisive, and you could tell that she was just in it, and once you feed her the ball, she's definitely the X factor, because we just got, even during the game, I was like, feed her more, because it was typically, Hines Allen, sometimes Natasha Cloud that were on her, and I was like, get it so when Natasha's on her, she could get a foul again, that's where they were picking up their fouls, when they were on her. And so I just think you got to keep feeding JJ. You have to. She's going to be huge, because I don't think they put as much pressure until she's really under the rim, if they can get to her fast enough.
Yeah.
Their focus seems to be really just Stewie, Sabrina, and they can bounce around quick though. So their defense can be suffocating. So I think by feeding Jonquel, she's definitely the X factor for them, and she just played her game. She, I love the fact that she was so decisive. She wasn't second guessing her shot. She was just going up, taking it. And so that was great. Caught, provoking fouls. So that sent her to the line a few times. And so she's just a great player for this team, and she's going to be huge for them in this playoff run.
Yeah. So after a hustle play by Betnijah that managed to score at the very last second of the second quarter. The Liberty ended up, leading at halftime 46-42. And you got to feel good about that considering how the game started. And I think for the morale, it was important to be ahead at halftime to get going in the second half. But the second half, I would say it was all about Sabrina Ionescu.
Yep.
I felt like she had a chip on her shoulder, but like an extra spice, because between the Twitter discourse that, a lot of people were saying like, oh, who's the best team in New York, or who's the closest to win a title, and the Liberty would not even consider in the conversation. It was all about men's team. And then obviously the last game of the regular season, even though it didn't really count for anything, the way the Mystics celebrated that win, obviously it was a great play with Brittany Sykes, but you had, Natasha Cloud waving goodbye to the crowd, and then like I said last time, like Sykes, that was like ecstatic, like it was like, the most important game of the season. And so I know that Sabrina, she doesn't need much to play at a high level, but she definitely used that to fuel her passion in that game. And she played almost like never seen her before, like with that extra confidence, like nobody could stop her. Yeah. And I remember last year, especially players like Natasha Cloud and Brittany Sykes. Sykes was playing for the LA Sparks last year, but they had a tendency to really put a lot of pressure, double teaming her, and it was a struggle for Sabrina. But physically this year, she seems much stronger, and she beat them quite a few times. She wasn't just shooting free; she was attacking the basket as well. But she was just on another level in that second half, don't you think?
Yeah, she came out, and again, like I would say, Betnijah put the team on her back in the first half. Sabrina did it in the second half. I think, with her 3-point shots, and also with JJ setting some beautiful screens for her, because there was that one screen that JJ set in the second half, and Sykes just crumbled. Hit it there, right? Like, it's just like... Sykes just crumbled under that screen. It was such a good screen, but, that got Sabrina those threes, essentially. For Sabrina, from last year to this year, you just see how much she's improved. But you also see her desire to win. I don't think it takes much for Sabrina to be set off in terms of getting, showing it on the court. I think, no one likes to be disrespected on their home court. And it's not going to take much. And by, losing at the buzzer like that, and that's just a tough loss, especially when you fought that second half in the regular season game to come back and hopefully try to win it, or even take it to overtime. And to lose like that could be disheartening for a team, especially when the Liberty pride themselves on protecting home court, no matter regular season or playoff. And so that was probably a little bit of a gut check for them, and they needed to come out and be strong, because again, they haven't really seen Washington in a while. That regular season game, they hadn't played Washington in some time. Yeah. And at that point, Washington got some players back, and now Washington's a different team than what they played, a couple months ago. So they knew it was going to be tough, and Sabrina is coming out all guns blazing. She wants to win, and you see that on the court, that she's going to do everything she can to make sure her team wins.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that the Liberty are a different team too. I mean, by the time, between the time when they faced the Mystics, the first game of the season, where obviously things didn't go so well, till now, it's a different team. And I think, like, when I read, comments on Twitter or the media, I don't see a lot of people, rooting for the Liberty, which is, I mean, I love this team. Obviously, we're kind of biased because we're in New York and we're rooting for our New York team. But there's a lot to love about that team. Just the way they hustle, the different personalities and players and type of players that we have on that team, and they gave 100%. And I think that's what New York fans love the most about their teams. They don't necessarily ask them to be the best in the world. But as long as they give everything they got on that court, they would love that. And I have to mention the crowd. The noise level for that game. And it was only it was the lower level, so there was about, close to 9,000 fans. But it was probably like the loudest I've heard in a very long time at the Barclays. Yeah. And the feed off from the energy that the team was giving when they, started to dominate in the second half, and Sabrina was scoring freeze after freeze, like it was getting so loud. And the players also feed from the crowd. They say they're like the sixth player, because when they're a little bit down or when they need that extra energy, like the crowd is there to give that extra boost. And Sabrina, when she scores, because at some point the Mystics with Irons Allen, made a little comeback, we're back to down by 8 or 6 points. And then this is the moment where Sabrina scored 2 back-to-back threes, 2 screens from JJ, like you said. And the crowd went crazy. And, you could tell, her body language. She wanted to show, you're not going to take a game on our home court. I think that, she wanted to show that, the Liberty are not a soft team. A lot of people kind of underestimate them for some strange reason. But they got grit, and they're not ready to lose any game at home and take that series to Washington for game 3. Nobody that is rooting for Liberty or plays for the Liberty wants to see that happen. So,
and I think the Liberty, I feel like for some players they might be misunderstood, because I think with Breanna Stewart, Vandersloot, Jonquel Jones, these Betnijah Laney. You can even add Steph Dolson to the mix. Some of these players, they've been around, and they've been on, and some of the players have won championships, they're respected across the league. And so I just think, Breanna Stewart's respected. There's no question about that. People know her game. They see it. She's an all-around player. But I do think what happens with the Liberty a lot of times, and I think we saw that initially, even last year and this year, when you think about just simple things like going to the Barclays and you want to buy a jersey.
Yeah.
And the only jersey that initially that was up were Sabrina jerseys.
Yeah, two seasons ago.
Yeah, it was just wait, there's nobody else? At the time, I think I wanted Rebecca Allen's jersey, and that wasn't even there. And she had been on the team for a while, and I was just I was so surprised. Sabrina, and I was like, Sabrina just got here. Yeah, we love her. She's great. I'm not saying her jersey deserves to be there, but I'm like, where's the variety of having other players? And then you kind of slowly started to see the trickle of other players, and then again, this year, obviously, with Breanna Stewart and Vandersloot, those jerseys were up there pretty quickly. But I think, again, when you prioritize a player or lift up a player who I think at this stage of the game, she deserves to be lifted up. She's a great player, and she's only going to get better. But I think what happens within the league is that when you have already elevated a player that hasn't won anything yet, and you got to see they need to be battle tested. And for Sabrina, she went through injury the last couple of years. They made it, they snuck into the playoffs there last year, but you knew they weren't going to get that far, and now they have a team that can take them far. But I think until she has a championship under her belt, they're gonna get flack. Just because you've seen just how much she's gotten within the media space, and whatever sponsorship or whatever deal she may have, which, girl, get your bag. I'm hitting no shade. Get it. If it's being offered, why not? So I just think overall, though, when you see journalists and other people criticize, and we think sometimes that criticism is unnecessary. I think there's a little more to it than that, and it's not just about the game, because I don't think it's really about her game. I think there's just everything that surrounds it, the way our society is just set up with who you want to see, the look of the person you want to see, it's just there's just a lot within our own media space and in this country that things can seem unfair for some players.
Yeah, I mean, all I want is, to have a fair assessment, and, if you're a journalist, to not be biased. I mean, obviously you're going to have a preference, or if you follow a specific team, you're naturally going to root for those players and those teams. But the way I feel like sometimes the Liberty are sort of like ignored in the conversations of like, winning a title, or, automatically people say, oh, they face the Mystics, then, they're probably gonna be the upset of the first round. Like they automatically revert to like, oh, well, that could be the upset. Like they don't even take them seriously. And I feel like sometimes the bias kind of show. I have arguments, basketball wise, or on certain things that are related to how they play or manage certain situation, fine. But I think sometimes it's a little like, I don't know, dishonest, the way they portray. You could argue like, well, the Las Vegas Aces, most of the players came through the drafts and build the team that way. Fair enough. And you could also argue that they have a lot of players that have a personality that a lot of people gravitate towards them versus maybe some of the Liberty players that are a little bit more reserved. But the Liberty, like, nobody cared about them when they were at the bottom of the league. They got Sabrina as the number 1 draft pick. They had, and that's where I think, Jonathan Kolb, the general manager of the Liberty, totally deserved his Executive of the Year award, because he's been with the team since 2019. 2019, they were in Westchester. They were not doing so well. I think they were coming to the end of the era with Tina Charles, and trading someone like Tina Charles is, not something that is easy or that you necessarily willing to do, but they made those hard choices. They picked Sabrina, they picked Betnijah Laney. Betnijah had came from a breakthrough season in the bubble. They picked her. And then after that, they try rookies that didn't necessarily work. They try a young coach. It didn't necessarily work either. And at some point, they had to make tough decisions. Now, as fans, we obviously love some of those players. Didi Richards, Michaela Onyenwere, Rebecca Allen, all those players. Crystal Dangerfield. But at some point, if you want to win a title, maybe you need to make strong decisions to turn things around. And so you're not going to blame, the team or the Liberty to manage to get in the free, off-season players like Stewie, Sloot, JJ. And on top of that, it's not like they're players that, think they're better than who they are, or, bragging or whatever, arrogant. They give 100%. They're humble. So for me, it's like, I don't know what, you wouldn't like about that team. And that's why I was really pleased with the way they ended that game, just to go back and finish on that first game. Like, they just showed that they are here, that we are one of the teams to beat. And the way they settled the score at the end and had a couple of frees to put an end to that game really showed me that they have the mentality and the desire to, bring the first title for New York in the history of the WNBA.
Yeah, they had that opportunity is definitely there for them, and they've been building this. They've been building up to this all season long. You weren't sure at the beginning of the season, the first half of the season. You're wondering, like, I don't know. They might need to take this full season together and then, come back strong the next season. But, right after, the All-Star break, they came back on a vengeance. I mean, I believe they still had the best record in the league to close out, the second half of the season. I mean, they only had 2 losses. So, it's either them or the Aces, but like I do think the Liberty had the best record and for the second half. And so they've been building to this. This is where they're going to get battle tested. Just like everyone says, playoffs, everything resets to 0. This isn't like, because we play them in the regular season, it's going to be the same in the playoff. No, everyone's going to play with a different edge. You're going to see players that are doing well get even better because they're going to kick it into another gear because everybody wants to win.
Yeah.
This is your opportunity to get that trophy. And just because you're number 2, in the standings and the Mystics are 7th, that doesn't mean anything. Everything resets. You're playing a tough team, and they have to have their head in the game from minute 1, and they just have to go out there and do their thing.
So next game 2, still in New York, will be on Tuesday at 7 p.m. What do you think is going to be the key to that game? Because the challenge with the playoff is that obviously you're facing the same team in a very short amount of time, and you have chances to make adjustments and things like that. So how do you see that game play out? Because it's a do or die for the Mystics. They lose, they go home, and New York moves to the next round.
I can see them trying to get the ball in Elena Deladon's hands more. She definitely didn't. I mean, she scored, 11 points?
11 points, and what was shocking is that she didn't take a single shot in the third quarter.
Yeah, I would think that's going to change. So, definitely defense is going to be huge for the Liberty, especially Stewie, JJ, because between Deladon and Hines Allen, Hines Allen had a great game. And so I think they're going to need to adjust on her in particular. And so I don't know if that's, definitely JJ's opportunity to pick up that defense, pick up that assignment. It's not going to be easy because obviously Sabrina had 7 threes. You're going to be watching for her in the 3-point shot. You still want to try to suffocate Stewie, but something's going to give there. So hopefully everyone can still continue to contribute. Like Betnijah is going to start with the defense, and that way you can get on runs, and hopefully by getting on some runs you can move the basketball the way you want to. I think for the Liberty, even though they won the game, they weren't really able to move the basketball as quick as they wanted to because Washington was just quick on defense, and they were quick to get back, and so it was just it made it difficult for the Liberty at times, not every time, but at times.
Yeah, and I think what I would be really interested to see is how Sabrina is going to play, and I'm 100% sure that they're going to revise their game plan for next time around and put a lot of focus on her and probably try to do what she had to face all season long last year, those double teams. So for a player like Sabrina, it's also where you're going to see the growth as well, like how she's going to respond to more pressure on her. But then if they put more pressure on her, maybe that will free another player.
Like
and
Stewie. Even
though the Mystics has done a great job against Stewie this year so far, I really can't see her having 2 games in a row a bad game. So I definitely expect Stewie to have a much better game offensively. And that's the beauty with the Liberty. Pick your poison. Like, if one person has a bad game or if you focus too much on one player, then there's going to be another player that is going to perform. And so I really hope that the Liberty, and I'm sure they will, but really take this game seriously, give everything they got, and make sure they take care of business so that they don't have to go to Washington. But like you said, I think the defense is what's going to set the tone first.
And the thing even for someone like Sabrina Ionescu, even if you double team her, the thing is, a lot of times you would double team her when she was coming up court, especially if she had the ball, if she was bringing the ball up. Now you have Sloot. So it's likely if you keep the ball in Sloot's hands to bring it up most of the time at least, you may not get as quick a double team. And what Sabrina has developed this season is getting into the paint. She didn't do that as much she definitely didn't do that much last year, by getting into the paint, driving, even having a couple of mid-range or just even some sort of hook shot, floaters. If she can do all of those things, she's going to be okay. I definitely think, they'll make the adjustments on her, but she'll also adjust. I don't think like last year she's just going to focus on being at the 3-point line. She's going to adjust and do what's necessary and take what the defense gives her.
Yeah, and one final point, and I was looking at the stats. Do you think Sandy is going to rely on her starting lineup just as much? Because she, played her starters for most of the games. I mean, you look at the minutes. Sabrina plays 39 minutes, Tui 38, Betnijah 36, Jonquel and Van der Sloot 33 and 34. And, like Marine Johannes or, Stephanie Dawson or Kayla Foran, they didn't play a lot of minutes, and they usually play at least 14, 15 minutes. Do you see that happening again on Tuesday?
It's likely. I think it's going to depend on how this game goes, because you're going to need defense. And at some point, defensively, you're going to want KT out there. Definitely. You're definitely going to want Kayla Thornton out there at some point. It's just going to be, it's going to depend on how this game goes. If Washington is scoring like they did, you might see more KT, out there. But you also got to be careful with, if you have both Deladon and Hines Allen out there, it's tough. You're gonna you need speed, and you're gonna have to keep JJ and Stewie out there a bit longer than maybe what you would like. But they have height in Washington, so you need to match that, and so you gotta. But KT can hold her own, because she definitely has some nice plays herself. But yeah, the defense is what's gonna help them the most.
I think my fear is that if the game is started in the first half, she's definitely going to rely heavily on the starters, considering the fact that if they beat the Mystics, they won't play until Sunday for game 1 of the second round, which leaves a lot of time for them to rest. So unless it's a blowout and they're starting to have a comfortable lead in the first half or in the third quarter, I think she's probably going to rely a lot on the starters. Let's see. I mean, obviously, I would want Marine to play a little bit more and bring that extra magic, to the crowd. But at the end of the day, you got to do anything you can to win that game. And, the result gives all the reasons for Sandy to continue that way. So we'll see how it goes. But please make sure, if you live in New York, to show up for that game if you can, if there's still any tickets left. And if you're not, in New York, make sure to tune in and watch that game, because it's going to be great basketball, whether you're rooting for the Liberty or not. We cannot wait to be at the Barclays again and experience what we experienced this past Friday, and hopefully with a positive outcome. But like before, we'll definitely record an episode after the second game, so be on the lookout on Wednesday for the next episode. But as we always say, Felicia, let's go Liberty!